Welcome to the Restaurants Grow podcast, where you get tips, tricks, and tactics on how to grow your restaurant business. Today on the show, we have Brian M. Lowe, President and CEO of BML Public Relations. Have you ever heard of the pizzacchini, the gender reveal lasagna, and the edible cheeseware? They came from the work they do at BML Public Relations. Brian, their founder, is a self-proclaimed media relations nerd. I'm totally okay with that title. He's a sole proprietor, a news junkie, music obsessive, and frustrated but faithful New York's Giants season ticket holder. I don't know what that feels like because I'm a baseball fan. We just don't care. We're happy that games just happen every day. BML has also done work with companies you might have heard of like Monster Jam, Lyft, Panera, Applebee's, and Arby's. And through that work, Brian and his team have done a lot of work on new store openings and have learned a lot of tactics, some of which we are going to get into today. I'm excited because Brian being on the show here, he and I had a nice pre-show conversation and revealed a lot of things that I had never even thought of, and I've been around the circle a few times, so we're excited to have Brian on the show. Fun fact, Brian used to be the drummer in a punk, funk, and ska band who's played on the Vans Warped Tour, and I'm going to guarantee I was at one of the shows, but that's a conversation for another time. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Rob. I'm psyched to be here.
Awesome, man. Okay, let's just kick right into this. I like to ask a nice starter question here to kind of ease right into it, so we'll go that way out. When you see a PR campaign for a new store opening, what's the one thing that you're like, how did they forget to do this?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, it's a lot of things that I've seen that are baffling to me are oftentimes when people don't do PR at all because they figure either, oh, it's too expensive, or we don't have that long-term, or that bigger, client retainer. So from a PR standpoint, I mean, PR, I think and of course I'm a believer in it, and it's obviously what I've dedicated my career to, but I think at the end of the day, people talk about influencers, and that's like social influencing. PR does such a great job in generating awareness and buzz in a marketplace and convincing people to come out and try it. This is why you need it. This is what the product does. This is what the brand does. This is what makes it great. This is why you need it in your life, right? So a lot of that, there's a lot of competition out there, and that's an opportunity where PR as a tactic, I think, gets a chance to, to really do its thing and to really help drive that awareness. And you do it through consistency, which then will eventually, drive traffic, drive trial, all of that. But on the thing that drives me the most, like the craziest on grand openings in general, the thing, even if whether they have a big commitment or whether they have a small commitment to a PR push to support an opening, what I will say sometimes, or a lot of times, is the ribbon cutting. Oh, who cares? You know what I mean? Like, it's just a red ribbon, people standing there just with a red ribbon. And I say that from meaning that, like, look, it's your biggest moment. It's the biggest newsworthy moment you have as a new location, whether you're a restaurant or whatever the brick and mortar location is. So for me, just to have people standing there with a red ribbon, media doesn't care. The image of that clients want you to send sometimes to media are like, it's 10 people holding a ribbon. Everybody's looking a different way. There's no real visual communication of what the brand does, any of those kinds of things. So for me, I think I'm a big believer in like creating a moment. What's the media moment we're going to create? So if you're a golf brand, having simulators and the like that, how about the ceremonial, everyone tees off at once, or some kind of action that really speaks to the brand. It can communicate the story or much of the story just with a general visual. So when I see, we look at the business publications, regional business publications and the like, and I see 30 people all huddled around a red ribbon, I go, ugh, puke.
Okay, so I want to dissect that for a second because I'm laughing over here.
Okay.
Let's say the store is doing lots and lots of stuff, and the red ribbon, is the red ribbon okay then, or no, get rid of it? Are we done with the red ribbon?
I just think, no, I mean, look, for me, I just think that it's not going to play as well. So if you're investing the time and the resource to do all those other things that are great, right? It just feels like that's the last, we'll just check that box, versus like, that's a very old school way of looking at it. I don't know that it's ever gotten quite the refresh that the approach that we try to take, which is just like, make it fun, make it interesting, make it more newsworthy, because then you're going to get better media pickup as a result on the earned media front. And in theory, maybe you'll be more front and center than instead of in a regional publication, business, publication on page 45. And by the way, it ends on page 46. You know what I mean? So I think for me, it's definitely part of, there's, as you know, right? No, you know better than anybody. There's so many layers to the onion of all the things you should be doing on a grand opening. To me, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying take a little bit more time, the way you're taking that time to think through those other, things that you're doing to get out in the market and to drive interest and attract potential business. Don't just lay down on it and go, well, yeah, the red ribbon. So it should be part of it. Just think about it a little bit more. Try and create a better visual.
Okay, comparative scale of 1 to 10, not overall scale, comparative. If, let's say, red ribbon's what, like a 2 in your book, a 1?
Yeah.
What would be like a hula hoop contest?
What would be a hula hoop contest? So, it's funny. I give this example, even though it's from a past agency life. But I just always thought that this was, it was a very creative team that agency I was part of. And for instance, back in the day, they would open Hard Rock cafes. And I thought it was, and sometimes I would, be pulled into that team to maybe support a grand opening or something like that. From a media relations standpoint. But what those guys always did, which was great, was it's, again, creating a great visual stir. So that the example that I tend to give to people is Hard Rock's about to open. They have all those dignitaries. Sometimes they have celebrities. But even if you don't have celebrities, right, what's a story that resonates and tells the story of Hard Rock and who they are? They would take 100 dignitaries outside of a location. Everybody have a cinder block in front of them and an acoustic guitar. And they'd count it off in unison, and everyone would do a guitar smash. It doesn't get more rock and roll. It doesn't get more visual. It's an action shot that was interesting and communicated a story. So to me, and that was simple, pretty simple to pull together. I'm not saying that people need to do something that, oh my God, we need $50,000 just to stage a ribbon cutting. No, you just need to be creative. You need to take a minute and say, what's interesting and most importantly, what's fun? I'm the kind of, marketer. I believe that fun is the bait that should attract, most of the time your client base, right? So figuring out a way to capture the brand, have some fun with it. And I think that's a great example that hopefully will resonate with people as they think about what's the version of that we could do for our brand.
So Pete Townsend level smashing guitar 10, hula hoops 4. That's what you're saying.
Correct.
No, I hear you. Okay, all right, enough fun. Let's get a little more serious.
Sure.
I think that people kind of struggle to think about a very particular division in restaurant PR, and I'd like for you to help us understand what is the difference between industry PR, consumer PR, and how should multi-unit brands separate the two? Because also, I'm not sure every agency does both well. You know what I mean? So
right.
How do you think about that?
Yeah, listen, I think that's a great question. As a matter of fact, I was just on a webinar for the International Franchise Association with some other partners that we work with, talking about this exact subject, right? Where's the line? Who should own what? From a PR standpoint, I believe that it should be a collaborative approach. I think that, whereas a lot of times you can take multi-unit franchisees or even individual franchisees, sometimes they're just given a playbook, right? I think corporate needs to first of all, you need to know who you're dealing with, right? If you're dealing with a single franchisee who really doesn't have a lot of marketing experience, a playbook alone is not necessarily, here, go do this. That's okay, then hand me a playbook that says I should build a spaceship. I'm not going to do that well. They're not going to do that well. So, but simplifying it and making sure that from an ownership standpoint, I think that franchisors should control the strategy and the messaging and the assets, and because they're the ones who really control the brand and the perception of it and the image of it and all of that. But franchisees in their local markets, it's great to be able to have them to some degree, either with an agency partner or a freelancer or somebody in-house, to try to also engage media on a local level. Because I think that, so for instance, we do a lot of work with Flynn Restaurant Group, so they're the world's largest franchise company. So we represent, call it 400, we'll say close to 500 Applebee's locations for them. Applebee's corporate does a great job in putting out things into the national landscape, right? So various promotions and seasonal, LTOs and things like that. They put it out there in the national landscape, and it kind of hangs out there. It gets some national coverage, but it doesn't necessarily trickle down to the local markets the way that it used to, just because the media landscape has changed. That's where either an agency like us or a freelancer or somebody in-house needs to then take information about that of that promotion and really try and hammer the regional and local media for that media coverage, because that's the boots on the ground coverage that drives people through the door. It's generating that local market awareness. It's generating, the interest of consumers and hopefully driving them through the door. So I do think that corporate should control it. They should be a great resource for the regional people. And that's kind of answer number one to your question. Answer number two is from a trade standpoint, I think that, look, it's really important to focus on things like Fran Dev, because look, we're looking for investors and we're looking for other potential franchisees, right? So making sure that we're staying in touch with trades so for instance, in the restaurant space, so all the restaurant trades, Nation's Restaurant News, QSR, all those types of publications, and using PR and harnessing it to use for thought leadership, right? And having your C-suite of people out there talking about, innovations, technology, lessons learned, different campaigns and things that are working for them. Because as potential franchisees are even doing research on you, they want to see that your C-suite is active, that they are engaged in the community, they're sharing best practices, they're case studying. It's like their version of case studying. So being able to share those kinds of things, are really interesting in the industry, also because it's a small industry, as we know. Everybody's keeping an eye on everybody else. So I think that there's a tremendous benefit to that. On the franchising side, if you're a franchise concept, back to what I was saying about investors. Investors, if they start doing research on you, they want to know that you're active. They want to know that you're talking about master franchise agreements and expansions into new markets, expansions in existing markets. So making sure that you're championing all the successes of your business. I think sometimes people worry about it's such an ego play and it's thumping their chest. Well, there's a way to do it. You don't have to sound like an arrogant dink. You can do it in a way that is subtle and still delivers the message. So I think there's those two sides, right? There's the franchise trade, there's the restaurant trade. Then on the consumer side, I would argue that all of this is a vicious cycle, because Fran Dev's important and everybody wants to do Fran Dev, and there are some much bigger players in that space than our agency per se, but we do it as well. But I think you have to check all these boxes, because you have to remain visible to the industry, visible to the for all your expansions and the successes and championing the successes. But then you also, if you're doing great consumer coverage as well, and you're creating great promotions and generating consistent publicity, like really all of that thing in the cycle, that's what all drives the success of a brand overall. Because if you're doing great on the franchise trade side and your consumer stinks, I mean, again, what does your balance sheet look like you're putting in front of franchisees? It's soft. Well, why would somebody choose you over a concept that's got all three of those categories unlocked? So I think that it's important to do all three. There are agencies that definitely, sort of segment it and say, we're Fran Dev, or to be honest, as a PR person, we do all of it. It's all important. We're not just Fran Dev. We're not just consumer. We tell franchise stories. We tell trade stories, franchise trades, restaurant trades, business stories with all the national landscape. We tell the consumer, we create consumer promotions, consistent consumer press. We do it all because it all does matter at the end of the day.
Amen. Slightly different take or adjacent take. I think that momentum is built by multi-channel awareness.
Yes.
Right. And so if you're trying to grow your franchise count, right, and you're also trying to have your store successful, the more places that I interact with your brand and the more channels, the more places, the more it feels like a phenomenon. Yeah. Right. So like if there's consumer PR and there's social media and there's influencers and there's trade PR, like all of a sudden, like I can't avoid the next Dave's Hot Chicken opening. Like, yeah, it's going to feel bigger, and then that's going to add to the momentum.
Yeah, well, listen, there's no doubt. I mean, to me, it was just sort of honing in specifically on the PR side to it. No, absolutely. I mean, all those other channels, the digital channels matter. All of that really matters at the end of the day. It's not, listen, when we talk to clients too, or potential clients, one of my questions is always, okay, so what else are you doing to support the brand? Because if you're counting on just PR to get you to the promised land, I don't know that I want to sign on for that, because we can't do it alone. To your point, there's so many different facets of the marketing mix, and they all have to work together in order to accomplish the goals.
Amen. Okay. I want to segue us to a different place here. I know that you have a rock solid new store opening PR plan, and I definitely want to talk about it. But let's cover like a few basic things that I'm sure everybody has either thought about, thinking about, or asking. Okay. Very specifically, when should a PR campaign begin for a new store?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and that's one of the things to me, as early as possible. I mean, realistically, if you're talking about a franchise concept, from the signing of a master franchise agreement should be that first touch point, especially if that company is typically based in the market that they're going to be opening up locations in and planting their flag and expanding in. So if you can start as early as that, that's the ideal scenario. For us, I think this whole package that we've created is really about maximizing as many media pulse points as you can. So various waves of coverage to start building momentum as early as possible. And so if you can start at master franchise agreements, great. If you don't have that luxury and you can sign it once you can start once the lease has been signed, great. That's a good point too. If you've even kind of gotten to a point where you're already through that, just as quick as maybe we can talk about, hey, how many people are we hiring? Let's tell the business story. Let's tell the franchisee story. So all of that typically, I think, like anything in life, as long of a runway as you can get, you can start. If you're kind of given a gigantic plane to land on a small runway, maybe you take a couple of those, the news pulses and combine them and go with what you've got. But I think you've got to at least have probably a month and a half's lead time, in order, probably actually a solid month of lead time, because I think you can make a lot of noise in a short amount of time, if it's the right kind of noise. And also market size matters. A lot of times, if you're, look, in New York City, it's a tough place to cut through. But if you're in some of these smaller markets, a lot of times you can still be big news in a small market. So I would say a solid month is typically what we do with Unveil. But there are times where, because we have found that we don't always have the luxury of the super long runway, but you can still be effective starting a month out.
Okay, I'm guessing if I ask, is it ever too early, your answer is going to be no. And if I ever say, is it ever too late, you're also going to say no. Ideally, what would be like the right amount of time? Be like, okay, store is opening in X months. Let's have our initial make the plan meeting. Like, what's the ideal time frame for that?
So, I don't want to say that's a tough one. It is and it isn't. Like, because the reality is, like, a lot of concepts that we're working with right now, especially using the Unveil model, which is the productized PR package to support grand openings. A lot of times what we're doing right now is we're talking with brands, and we've made that model very cost effective. And obviously I'll get into that in a few minutes, but we've made it cost effective to the point where for us, the price is scalable. So the more units that you can commit to, the more cost effective the price is going to be for a 3-month campaign in order to open the doors for each location. So I would say that it's one of those things that we're trying to like create a campaign that is cost effective, that gives us enough time and enough focus and to really make the impact and generate media coverage in the market that supports the opening. So I would say that we do that. We do pre-opening month, opening month, and then post-opening, trying to make sure we're supporting a honeymoon phase. I would say that that it's one of those things where you can still make the impact in a short amount of time. Sorry, did I not answer that?
I'm saying if I was going to hire you for a new store opening, do you want 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months?
Oh yeah. I mean, like, look, the more time, the merrier. But realistically, I think that it is completely accomplishable in. You start 30 days out, you handle all those news pegs, you do a really hard opening month push, and then, like I said, you do that post-opening 30 days as well. And by then, all the coverage you should be able to consistently generate, should really help on top of everything else you're doing to support the opening from maybe a digital standpoint and out of home or whatever else you're doing. That should be plenty of time to really get your locations up and out of the gate really strong.
Awesome. Perfect segue. All right, let's take like 5 minutes. What does your new store opening plan? Obviously, you don't have to give us every detail, but like, what does that look like? What's the framework of that plan?
Yeah. So the idea is, so Unveil was kind of birthed, look, I'm an agency owner. If I'm just being completely transparent with you, I want to sell you the everything, right? I'm an agency owner. And we do a lot of things. But what I noticed is even like before, like heading into the election for about 18 months or so, there wasn't a lot of movement in terms of bringing people on a retainer based. And, you have a lot of conversations. Everyone's having a lot of conversations, but there wasn't a lot of movement to the finish line. And I've always been surprised in the franchising space that there wasn't a productized version that is packaged, especially think of the emerging side, right? A lot of the emerging brands don't necessarily have the budget to bring somebody on at a retainer that's close to $10,000 a month or maybe even north of that to handle everything. And a lot of times the bigger agencies that kind of take those numbers, they don't include grand openings and things like that. So for us, it was about creating a model that gave emerging, whether you've got a handful of locations or whether you're the Flynn groups of the world, right, where you've got a ton of them, thousands of restaurants, and creating a package that is designed to be 3 months, a 3-month campaign, like I mentioned earlier, pre-opening phase, opening month, and post-opening. And it's designed to, we mechanize a process. So we land on a strategy together. We come to the table and say, these are the creative elements we think that we should bring in. These are the media targets. These are objectives. These are the goals. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to package this and prioritize it to say, hey, Rev, if you've got 30 locations that you're opening this year, commit all 30 of those to us. And we're going to work on the strategy together. And we're going to, look, we typically lose. We either break even or slightly lose on the first location because we're front loading all of the work for all of the locations you're going to open that year. But we land on a strategy, you bless it, and then we follow the process that is a very straightforward process that, like I said, it's all about generating consistent media in wave after wave after wave that delivers the message, educates the market as to who you are, where what you're all about. To generate that interest from people, before we even get the doors open. And then we handle all the opening month stuff. And then, which is, pre-opening events, influencer visits, influencer, one-offs, or events. We mix all these things in, and in theory, it's a scalable. So for instance, depending on the volume of locations you had, we do some per location openings for groups for $3,000 each. That's $1,000 a month in PR support for 3 months. That's peanuts. You couldn't even find a retainer for a low level retainer for that kind of business. But again, we've created this because it's effective. It is, and I got to tell you, we launched it, and when we launched it, I had 30 leads out of the gate from people who are saying, wait a minute, this has got to be bullshit. This can't be real. It sounds too good to be true. You're doing all these things. Depending on how many locations I have, that's really the price. And the answer is yes. And it just was birthed out of seeing a void in the market. People don't want the retainer stuff right now. And maybe, listen, you wear a lot of hats. You tell me, I'm curious your take on this. Would you prefer something like this, or do you want the big expensive retainer?
I want you to reveal the secret sauce. That's what I want.
The secret sauce is basically just, like I said, it's volume, right? It's volume, and for us, I think it's just the general approach and the internal process that we take. So it's funny, Unveil really does take a page out of the franchising industry. We're mechanizing the process. Now, granted, I don't want anybody to sit there and listen and go, oh, they're mechanizing, so it's just a cookie cutter thing. No, we're going to learn your brand. It's going to reflect your brand. There's going to be creative that's sprinkled in that, reflects the personality of the brand. But the waves, the tactical waves, yeah, that's the mechanized stuff. But then we're going to breathe life into it that makes it feel like it's all about your brand, and we're going to get it out there. Oh, and by the way, you get a number where, when's the last time anyone got an invoice where they went, is this an error? What? You say that when you get one that you're like, wait, there's too many zeros on this. That's not what this is about. And I'm just a big believer in, look, we love doing PR. I love the franchise industry. There's a ton of news. There's a ton. We've got clients in other categories we work in where people come to us and go, all right, we need you, but I got nothing. Like, franchising is not that. There's creativity in the food and the menu. There's all the thought leadership. There are PR stunts. There are openings. There's so much to choose from. If anything, we're constantly telling people, like, hey, we got to dial back a little bit, because there's so much going on that if everything's important, nothing's important. So let's be strategic and let's let's get the meat out there that we should be, that's going to have an impact and drive consumers or drive awareness about, on the brand dev side.
All right, we got about 3-4 minutes left here, so I want to go quick hit. Okay.
And sorry, listen, that's my occupational hazard of being a PR guy. I talk a lot. My bad.
No, that's fine. Listen, buddy, I'm happy to have you on the show. People aren't here to listen to me. All right, quick hit answers. Okay. Yeah. As part of this new store opening playbook, press release to the wire, does that matter? Is that something you do?
Press release to the wire will cost almost the entire budget we'll probably charge you, and it doesn't return anything. So that'll listen, there's benefits if you're in a luxurious situation where you're like, well, we're doing this for SEO. That's one thing. But if people think that they're going to put something on Business Wire, PR Newswire, or like one of those kinds of feeds, and I know there's a few free ones too, those things just kick back sort of phony baloney reports that make it seem like, newsrooms all across the country are looking at your stuff. They're really not. Perfect example, put something over the wire, copy and paste the headline of the release, go to Yahoo Finance, do it in an incognito window, and copy and paste the headline of that press release into the search bar, and you won't even find it. Yet you'll get a report that says, great news, this was on Yahoo Finance website, and you got 32 million media impressions. Some of that stuff is all phony baloney. I'd rather you see, honestly, the Unveil side, we agree on that number, we execute our side. I'd rather you take that extra $2,000 or $2,500 and put it into something else. So put it into a radio partnership, a paid radio partnership. But yeah, those wire feeds and all that kind of stuff, it's all phony baloney.
Okay. What about influencer marketing?
Influencer marketing, I have to say that I have a love-hate with. I think that there are certain categories and certain industries it works for, but I do think the love side is that it does work in the food side. So I do think, and I know that, obviously you're a content creator, you've got a lot of great content out there. And I think that you're a great example of that, right? Your content, I think, helps move the needle. So I think it's just about being very strategic and making sure that you're partnering with the right people, digging into their content, looking at their engagement rates, making sure that the brands that they're also doing other partnerships with are in the wheelhouse. I've had clients that have sent us, just go ahead and send this client some, send this influencer some product. And then you look into them and I go, hey, this is like a sex toy review company. Do you really want to be associated with that? Because I don't want you associated with that. So it's all about knowing your targets, doing a little bit of research. And it's not rocket science when you can see a great post and you see somebody's got 2 million followers and you see 100 likes, they're buying the majority of that audience, I think. But so, yes, I think it's definitely a necessary part of it. I think influencer events can be hard to pull off because you're banking on so many people's schedules all being able to fit into one. If you've got a concept that's on fire that people are crawling out of the woodwork to or climbing your doors, then an event is a perfect way to do it. We do a combination of events where we can and a lot of one-off visits. And we try to barter. Don't dismiss the people who are not putting their hand out. Try and barter and try to leverage the assets you have to barter with somebody. You'll still get great content and a solid return on it.
TV, radio, print, traditional media still matter?
Traditional media still matters. So one thing that I really believe about from a social standpoint is that people go, social. Hold on. Don't forget, social is a channel the way print was, right? Print and online, really online now. Broadcast, people always ask that question what about the traditional channels? The traditional channels are still feeding content out into the social universe as well. And that's very shareable. And honestly, most of those websites, all the news sites and national and regionals that I follow, they have a ton of followers still. So people might not be watching the 11 o'clock news the way they did, but that station, chances are you follow it and you'll see it in your feed. It'll pass through in your feed. So it's definitely a hybrid situation for sure. The two need to go hand in hand.
Okay, so creative idea, starting early, multi-channel, influencer, and no ribbon cutting. That's the playbook.
No ribbon. So help me God if I see you and one of your concepts rep doing a ribbon cutting with a red ribbon. I'm going to show up.
No, we like balloons. All right, Brian, we're coming to the end of the conversation here. This has been really interesting. Clearly, that we could probably go on for this about hours and hours and hours, and you spent a lot of time building a plan that works. If people wanted to learn more about you or the playbook or things you've done, what would be the best way for them to sort of get in contact?
So they can visit bmlpr.com. There's obviously through our website, there's contact information. Hit me up on LinkedIn or just info@bmlpr.com. Would love it. And listen, it's not all about just trying to get you in the fold and try and run the meter. I'll talk about this stuff all day long. And actually, we coach a lot of people. We get a lot of calls for people who aren't necessarily maybe a fit for what we're trying to do, but we're still trying to leave people with or provide some kind of value to say, like, look, here are some lanes you should consider. But thanks so much for having me, Reva. This was awesome. I appreciate it.
Yeah, here's the way I look at it. If you know you need it and somebody on your team is not good at it, get somebody else to do it.
Without a doubt. And stop with the, I don't like this price, but I got a guy. Like, you're going to spend double the amount of money with like the guy you got. Take the experts at their word for what they do and see if there's a way to negotiate instead of just going, let me go to the guy who's going to just sort of do a math job.
Yeah, sometimes it amazes me how little people value their own time. Anyway, Brian, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Please jam that subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you like to listen in. And if you enjoyed the show, please share with a friend. Thank you.